Of the Metropolitan Nashville Sports Authority to order. We'd like to thank Bridgestone Arena and the Nashville Predators for hosting us once again. We always appreciate the hospitality, and we will begin our agenda with the consideration of the minutes from the July 21st, 2022 meeting. You should have received the minutes. If you have had an opportunity to review them, we'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and properly second. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. And the motion passes. At this time, we'll have our Executive Director's report from Monica Faulkner.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have a full agenda, so in the interest of time, I'm going to be especially brief this morning. You have the agenda before you. I do want to note one change to the order. The East Bank Vision presentation will precede the Nissan Stadium update, but other than that, the agenda stands as presented. Also at this time, and I did this in the Finance Committee meeting, but for those who weren't there, I want to introduce Brandon Little, who has joined our team as Special Events Coordinator. Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
We're excited to have him on the board. Or on our team. He has really just he has taken off. But Brandon is from Arkansas. He's a graduate of Arkansas State University and served as a Special Events Coordinator with their athletics department and is getting ready to graduate with his Master's in Sports Management. Again, we're excited to have him. If you haven't had a chance to, please introduce yourself to him. We look forward to working with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Monica. I tried to make my rounds around the table from our last meeting, but if I didn't get to you, I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
That's my very brief report.
Well, thank you, Monica. That was very brief.
It was very brief.
Okay, so at this time, we're running a little bit behind because we had a number of items on our agenda for the Finance Committee meeting, which met this morning. So I will turn it over to our committee chair, Frank Harrison, will give us the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Finance Committee met, I'm going to be as brief as possible with this, but the Finance Committee met this morning at 9:30, and we considered the minutes of July the 15th, which we approved. Side letter agreement to the lease agreement between the Sports Authority and Powers Management was on the agenda. We approved that. As well as Finance Committee recommends approval for that. And so
This is consideration of the resolution approving a side letter agreement to the lease agreement between the Sports Authority and Powers Management. The recommendation has been made by the committee. Is there a motion for approval? So moved. Second?
second.
Okay. Any discussion? Questions? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. The motion passes.
Park Management Company, Tim Bewley, am I pronouncing that right, I hope, with Park Management Company, parking contractor, needs stating provided an update of their role and the update of their operations. Third thing on the agenda was the 2-year audit financial statement for Park and Management. We were given that report by Christina Kirby. Christina Kirby took the place of Tracy Thomas for the audit financial report for the 2 years. Finance Committee recommends the approval of that agreement.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we'll consider a resolution approving fiscal year 2021 audited financial statements for Parking Management Company. Once again, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. And this motion passes. Vice Chair Harrison?
Yes. Storm water control measures for First Horizon Park was on the agenda. The Sounds and Josh Hayes, Metro Water, made their presentation. The Finance Committee recommends approval for this resolution, which regards the expenses for the stormwater problems at the Horizon Park. So with that, I recommend approval from the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Vice Chair Harrison. Consideration of a resolution authorizing and approving expenses related to stormwater control measures at First Horizon Park. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion so made.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion, questions? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay, and the motion passes.
That concluded our agenda for Finance Committee.
Great. Thank you so much for that report. And I'd just like to say, we really appreciate the work that goes on within the Finance Committee meeting, which allows us to move prudently through this meeting. So thank you for all you do. Appreciate that. Any final questions for the Finance Committee? If not, the next item on our agenda is consideration of approval of a resolution pertaining to a request pursuant to Section 9B of the lease agreement between the Metro Sports Authority and Walsh Management LLC. Mary Cavara with Ingram Industries and Nashville SC is here this morning with a sponsorship request. As you know, Section 9A of the lease agreement between the Sports Authority and Walsh Management allows the management to obtain the Sports Authority's prior approval before naming the stadium or other areas of the premises. The authority, however, cannot withhold approval unless the proposed name violates applicable law or would reasonably cause embarrassment to the Sports Authority, which I don't think that's a concern. So I'll turn it over to you, Mary.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning. One of our corporate sponsors, Mapco Express, a company I believe everybody is familiar with, has offered to install up to 5 electric vehicle rapid charging stations in the South Stadium parking lot. During the construction phase, we did anticipate that there could be the possibility of electric vehicle chargers, so the infrastructure is already in place. The chargers will be branded by Mapco and will be maintained. Obviously, all the operational details need to be worked out, but I would be pleased to answer any questions about this proposed branding.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mary? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve naming the electric vehicle charging stadium after Mapco.
So moved.
Is there a second? No questions? No comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. Congratulations. The next item on our agenda is the East Bank Vision Plan presentation. And we're excited to have Anna Greider with the Metro Planning Department join us this morning. As we talk about the future of Nissan Stadium, it's important that we remember that the stadium is one part of the redevelopment of the East Bank. With that in mind, we're glad Ms. Greider is here to walk us through the East Bank Vision Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the Sports Authority for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm Anna Greider, as the chair mentioned, with the Metro Planning Department. I've had the opportunity for the last 18 months to project manage the East Bank study for the planning department. It's been a very big lift for our department, and we're really excited to have the draft out right now for public input. So I'm going to say next slide. Thank you. And so just to let everyone know that if you'd like to access the draft plan itself is on our website, eastbankstudy.nashville.gov. It's about 140 pages. It's a very dense and detailed planning document. So if you would like a shortened version, there's a 12-page executive summary available. We also have an interactive story map and an online survey and a list of public events. And we've been very busy since the plan was released on August 22nd. We've done 25 events in 25 days to try to spread the word and present to as many groups as possible. Next slide. So here's just some photos. We've been at farmers markets, at picking parties, at neighborhood associations. We've had a number of focused meetings related to important topics that we've got feedback on, including affordable housing, parks and greenways, and the bike and pedestrian network. So we have a lot more coming until September 30th when the survey closes. Next slide. So just some background on what a vision plan is and isn't. So a vision plan is aspirational. It's a look at the next 20 to 30 years of potential for the East Bank, and it reflects all of the community's priorities that we heard over the last 18 months. Builds upon all the existing plans and policies that have been in place over the years, and also on best practices related to planning riverfront cities. It will be presented for adoption to the Metro Planning Commission on October the 6th, and will form the basis of any future urban design overlays or design-based zoning tools that could occur for the East Bank. It's not detailed engineering or design plans, so the images within the document are not exactly what will be built on the East Bank, but they are providing some pictures and illustrations to what folks would like to see on the East Bank. It's not a rezoning, and it doesn't come with any funding in and of itself. Next slide. So we looked at the East Bank from multiple scales, given its location in the heart of the city. We wanted to make sure that we took every opportunity for the East Bank to address broader citywide needs, in particular related to transportation, our housing supply needs, stormwater and resiliency. And then we zoomed in on the 338 acres, which is our study area. And then we zoomed in further to the Metro-owned property, which is 113 acres in and around the stadium. Next slide. So our study area, the 338 acres, is from Jefferson Street south to where the interstate comes over the river. And it follows the interstate on the east side and the river on the west side. Next slide. And as I know you're all familiar, the majority of the East Bank today is the stadium, surrounding parking lots, and then mostly industrial uses. Of the 338 acres, 230 of that is pavement, whether it's parking lot, roadway, bridges. There are no continuous north-south street connections, which makes connectivity difficult, and there are no housing units on the East Bank today. In addition, the riverfront is accessible just a quarter mile of the 1.7 miles of riverfront that's there. So in looking at it from the planning department's perspective, there is a lot of potential for the East Bank to be a much more fundamental part of our city in terms of addressing multimodal transportation needs, having resiliency in our floodplain next to the river, and meeting some of our housing supply needs and other amenities that the community would like to see here. So next slide. So as I mentioned, 18 months of work went into this, over 20 public meetings, 3 online surveys, and the 4th one occurring today, with more than 1,500 responses. We had multiple technical meetings from federal, state, and local levels. We have a technical advisory committee, which your director served upon, and a neighborhood advisory committee. And so there has been a great deal of work gone into the plan. Next slide. From that, these were the 4 community priorities that we heard and have formed chapters in the vision plan. Relate to multimodal connections, equitable and affordable East Bank, respect for the river, and neighborhoods for Nashvillians. I'll just hit very quickly on each of those, as I know you guys have a full agenda. Next slide. So equitable and affordable East Bank, we heard a lot of feedback related to wanting to ensure that the East Bank is a place that everyone feels welcome to be a part of, to visit, to spend time, that restaurants and retail is affordable, that the places are safe and diverse. Next slide. And of course, a lot of feedback on affordable housing. So there, as I mentioned, there are no housing units on the East Bank. There's also not infrastructure in place to support housing or other uses today. So we do think that there's the potential for the area to address our housing supply needs, with the potential to create 10,000 housing units across the entirety of the East Bank, with 3,600 units of that on Metro-owned property. that would be housing at a range of income levels. So we're working with the Affordable Housing Task Force that the mayor convened to work with the community on developing benchmarks for each phase of development as it relates to affordability of housing. And there are commitments for Metro not to sell the property on the East Bank and to set aside property for affordable housing. Next slide. A lot of work went into connectivity. If you're familiar with the East Bank today, you have to navigate through kind of a maze of right and left turns to get through. We think it's important that we have a multimodal north-south street connection that provides direct connectivity through the East Bank. Next slide. And we looked at how that could connect to all the rest of our pikes and existing transportation system. If you're familiar with Nashville, we have a lot of east-west streets that can provide very direct connectivity, but north-south we're lacking in. We think the East Bank can be a core component of adding north-south connectivity to our city. Next slide. We, of course, looked at both scenarios as it relates to the future of the stadium. The one on your left is with the existing stadium and how the street grid should operate with an existing stadium. The one on your right is with the stadium moved directly to the east and the opportunity for the multimodal boulevard, which is the thicker orange line on your slide, and the street grid around it. So the vision plan contemplates both futures, and we worked hard to ensure that all the key priorities that were in the vision plan can be met under both scenarios. Next slide. So you'll see a street grid on your screen that is much more urban, creates lot and block format that could support new neighborhoods. None of these streets on your slide today exist. They would all be new streets proposed through the vision plan. Next slide. Similarly, that helps with transit, and we are proposing dedicated transit lanes on the new boulevard that would connect to Dickerson Pike, bringing folks over to the future Oracle campus and then through the East Bank over to KVB. We're also proposing an East Bank mobility hub, which would be a complement to WeGo Central downtown that would allow people to transfer buses, have bike storage, showers, restrooms, and then the opportunity to lease the air rights above it for affordable housing development or other development above it. Next slide. Here's a graphic of that multimodal boulevard with the center running transit with center running bus stops. So you would get off in the middle and cross the street to signalized intersections. So this gives an image of the wide sidewalks, landscaping, and the opportunity to have our first dedicated center running transit. Next slide. And there's a graphic of an image of how the mobility hub could be located in a scenario with the new stadium and the opportunity to provide connectivity between James Robinson and Woodland Streets, which are prime east-west connectors in our city. Next slide. Similarly, with bike lanes, we're proposing a robust bike network of dedicated, grade-separated bike lanes to be an example to the rest of the city of how to install infrastructure where you have the opportunity to build new streets. And those would provide connectivity all the way from Shelby Bottoms up to Oracle and over the new pedestrian bridge being built by Oracle into Germantown, and really start to create a loop so that biking can become a commuting opportunity as well as recreational. Next slide. And here's an image of an idea of a neighborhood street on the East Bank with those protected bike lanes, stormwater treatment within the sidewalk that's protected from the vehicular lanes. Next slide. Greenways, here's an image. The solid green lines are our existing greenways, which is a portion in front of the stadium and the pedestrian bridge. And the dashed lines would be proposed to be filled in through the vision plan and then connect up, as I mentioned, to the yellow dashed lines with the Oracle construction. Next slide. And here's an image of what that could look like along our river. The river is to your left. You see the vehicular lanes, dedicated protected bike lanes, and then a sidewalk that meanders down to the river with piers and overlooks to really help people feel closer to the water. Next slide. As I mentioned, the water was a huge component of this. both related to floodplain management and resiliency, but also to folks wanting to feel closer to the water and really feel like Nashville's a riverfront city. So you'll see in your image on the screen, if you could picture that during a high flood event, all of the green space could be flooded and would not be impacting lives and property. But when it's dry, it's an opportunity for greenways and overlooks and to be close to the water. Next slide. So there's a great deal of work on resiliency and the topography of the land and how we should manage our stormwater as we deal with future flooding events. Next slide. Again, if you can picture the trees on Victory Way, this is an opportunity to use the grassy area between them for stormwater management. Next slide. And we put a lot of thought into how to help people feel closer to the water and engage with the water, and that can be from a range of scales, which the vision plan shows opportunities such as the ones on your screen, which are for piers and overlooks and greenways. Next slide. To something that would be a more costly investment. This is the idea of a marina or dock with restaurant, retail, waterfront dining, and the opportunity for boat docking and kayaking. And so the vision plan lays out a bunch of scenarios for the potential future of our waterfront. Next slide. And finally, we have a chapter on future neighborhoods for Nashville, breaking up the 338-acre study area into smaller neighborhoods. And I'll focus on the central waterfront neighborhood for a moment, which is predominantly Metro-owned property. Next slide. And you'll see, again, the vision plan depicts the futures for both scenarios of either a new stadium or a renovated stadium, and the opportunities for green space, the street network, and the developable blocks under both scenarios. Next slide. And just to touch on the central park that you see in the scenario where the stadium moves, is both an opportunity for a great urban park for our city, but also to manage stormwater. It works with the ridgelines and topography of the land to store and slow water. So next slide. If you can imagine that underneath this park that's looking out towards the river, there is stormwater management and water quality functions happening underneath it that can help a district-wide stormwater management strategy rather than having each parcel having to have detention on its site. Well, that would be a new approach for Metro, and we're exploring it with Metro Water. Next slide. So finally, the vision plan lays out this future, a scenario where the stadium is moved and what the land around it could look like. Next slide. And then a scenario where the stadium remains, and similarly, the opportunities for development around it. Next slide. So we've had lots of events, and we have more upcoming. If you know folks who would like to learn more about the East Bank, our website contains all the information. We have affordable housing meetings coming up. We have a housing meeting actually this evening. And then we have bikes and greenways meetings, and we're also going to have a town hall meeting with the Urban League. So we have lots coming up. Next slide. And we hope to close public comment on September 30th and present to the Planning Commission at the beginning of October for adoption. Next slide. And that is my presentation. I know that you felt like I went fast or slow, but I finished now, so I'm happy to take questions from any of you.
Any questions for Anna? That was a lot.
Yeah.
Aspirational, I heard that, and did I hear you say 20 to 30 years is the vision?
Yes, I mean, it could extend almost to 50 years. I mean, it's as things are developed, but it is not something that's going to come up overnight. So we're planning out for the next at least 20 to 30 years.
Some of the words that I personally appreciate are equitable and affordable and neighborhoods. All those things will be vital. Can you speak a little bit about the survey and how you went about conducting the survey?
Yes, so the survey is an online survey. It's embedded in a story map, so if people are able to scroll through, you get the high points of each chapter, and then they're very simple survey questions gauging people's levels of support for each of the vision components, and then there's an opportunity to write in kind of whatever your thoughts are. So far, we've had about 370 survey responses. We also have paper surveys that we bring to events for folks that don't have the capability to get online. And so it's been a good way for us to gauge as we're going through this engagement process, kind of what are the topics that are bringing the most comments and the most interest. And generally the level of support has been really positive, and it's helped us figure out where we need to target our engagement. So if there's a lot of questions about housing, we are now doing a series of full housing meetings, things like that, to help us meet the questions that are out there.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question with reference to the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Is that affordable housing, is that 100% affordable housing development, or is that development where affordable housing would be a percentage of the housing units, like 5 or 10%?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when you say affordable housing, that means different things to different people. So that's part of what our housing team and planning is working through. A best practice is showing that having a mix of income ranges across the site is better for the city, better for neighborhoods. And so they're working with the task force and the community to figure out what should those mix of income ranges be. For example, the AMI numbers that came out recently is a number that's based on our 10-county area. So it includes very, very wealthy parts of Williamson County and has skewed the number really high. So the AMI for Davidson County is very high and not what the average Davidson County resident could afford. So we're working to make sure that the numbers are accurate for what is appropriate for Davidson County, and then working to understand the percentage mixes of affordable, deeply affordable, workforce to market rate.
And would you foresee the usual 5% or 10% of a housing development being affordable? Would you foresee that increasing?
So there's obviously a mix of publicly owned and privately owned land on the East Bank. And so there's the opportunity with the Metro-owned property to do a higher percentage of affordable housing. Compared to the ability for Metro, we can't require private property owners to build affordable housing. So we will be encouraging them to use all the tools available to get affordability into their developments. But there is the opportunity for more affordability on the publicly owned land, and that's what's being worked through at the moment. I don't know the percentages yet for that.
Okay, you mentioned, I believe, receiving 350 surveys.
Yes, 370 right now, yeah.
Was that a disappointment?
No, I mean, so we gauge the level of engagement based on kind of how many people are showing up at our events, and then how many hits on the website, and how many hits on the story map, and how many survey responses. So we still have until the 30th to get survey responses. The surveys we did previously ranged from, the last one we did, we got around 400 responses. So it's sort of fitting into the average there. We have noticed that doing our pop-up events where we show up at farmers markets or other events that are already going on, we really are able to draw a lot more people into the conversation. So those have been really successful. So that's been a good thing we've learned. But no, I wouldn't say it's disappointing. The responses are very thorough as well in there. The long form answers have been really helpful for us to read as well.
And thank you for your detailed responses.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions. Yes.
Anna, excuse me.
Yes.
I see with the illustrations, lots of people walking and riding bikes and things like that. What about people who need assistance in managing up and down that boulevard that shows there?
Yes, so one thing that is good about releasing a draft is that you can catch all the things you didn't catch when you were developing the draft. And so one of the comments we have received is that there is no elderly demographic in our visuals. And so we will be fixing that for the final draft, because we do want to show that this place will be accessible and wonderful for all ages. And so we have received that comment a few times about people needing either wheelchair access or just the older demographic. So we hope to have a more robust picture in the new draft. So thank you for that comment.
One other question.
Yeah.
Is the current construction going on near Cleveland and Dixon Road, is that part of pre-approval, or it's like the road is changed that runs right beside the interstate and?
Yeah, there's a
Weird
lot of
looking.
work happening up there. Yes, so that is River North, so technically outside of the East Bank City area, and it is the area adjacent to Cleveland is where the new Oracle campus will be going. So I know that NDOT has been out there constructing roads and infrastructure in preparation for that. So it is outside of the study area, but we have worked really hard to make sure that it all connects. So that North-South Boulevard that is partly Cowan Street today all looks like a seamless boulevard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks.
Next, we have Nissan Stadium doing their update. We have Sam Wilcox, Senior Advisor to Mayor Cooper, and Tom Cross, Deputy Law Director. Welcome.
We've got a whole crew. We also have our Finance Director, Kelly Flannery, here as well.
Okay, good morning, Kelly.
And I would just note, we gave this exact same presentation to Metro Council last night, so while the remarks and our comments will be the same, I'd encourage everyone to go watch that on Metro's YouTube page to see what questions Councilman Withers asked last night and the others in attendance. So, but happy to run you all through these slides as well, and then answer any questions you have. So with that, kick off. Thank you, Member Bender and the members of the committee here today. So we'll take you through these slides in a moment that will first cover some of the guiding principles that we are following as we evaluate any potential deal with the team. Finance Director Flannery will then walk through an overview of Metro's debt management process, including a review of Metro's long-term debt profile, and then stadium financing considerations and goals. Following Director Flannery, Tom Cross, our Deputy Legal Director, will give a high-level overview of customary primary documents and approvals that we would expect to be included in a complicated deal structure such as this one. Before I dive into the slides, I do want to just give the caveat that we are still negotiating with the team, and so there are certain commercial and legal terms that we're still working out, and so it's we don't want to be negotiating in public. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can be, but some of the questions we're not going to be able to answer today. So with that, maybe the first slide. One more, please. That's perfect. So earlier this year, the mayor outlined in an op-ed his principles for the negotiation process. Building on that statement of principles, here are the factors that Metro is considering and evaluating any new deal. First, we aim to reduce the burden on Metro's general fund. That is the fund that we use to pay our police force, our teachers, other public servants, as well as build parks, sidewalks, and other neighborhoods. And we're hoping to do that in a couple of different ways through any potential deal. One is to support any Metro contribution to stadium construction and maintenance. We'll look to leverage tourism and stadium-related funding sources. Furthermore, we're going to require the team to fund any construction cost overruns. And finally, what we know today is that we have a lease in place that requires Nashville taxpayers to be on the hook for millions of dollars per year for stadium maintenance and improvements. That is an unfunded liability. We don't have dedicated resources in the general fund or elsewhere to pay for those. We have to figure that out every year. We're hoping to eliminate that unfunded stadium capital maintenance liability and shift responsibility to the team for ongoing capital maintenance. Second, the state is kicking in $500 million, and the team will leverage private sources, including team cash, NFL loans, among other sources, to fund stadium construction if an enclosed stadium is approved. We have seen some speculation in the media that the Metro stadium construction contribution is going to be $1 billion. I can tell you that is not accurate. While we're not prepared to share the final numbers today, what we are committed to is that the Titans and private sources be the single largest contributor to any stadium project. Third, Metro will retain all ownership of stadium and campus property that we own today. Fourth, in any new lease we consider, we will take back the development rights forsaken in the original lease in order to transform the surface parking lots that currently characterize the East Bank into community uses like affordable housing, multimodal transit, parks and greenways, cultural and civic institutions, and others. Fifth, we'll make sure that any stadium solution generates demonstrable economic growth. And finally, as part of any new deal, we're going to make sure that the Titans stay in Nashville for a long time. With that, I'll turn it over to Director Flannery for her comments.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Who's doing slides? Just say it and it happens. Slide. Slide. Thanks. As the deputy mayor mentioned, we did this last night, and the audience last night was obviously City Council, who contemplates several different financing options, and most generally GO bonds and revenue bonds. So this probably a combination of wanting to make sure we didn't present one thing to one group and something to somebody else, and being a little lazy and not wanting to create two different presentations. This is kind of less important for your education, but just an FYI of what Metro contemplates when we issue debt. We really have two sources of long-term debt, and it's GO bonds and revenue bonds. I think the revenue bonds is the space this group's most familiar in. And the reason it's really applicable to you is the East Bank team had submitted some questions, and we were getting questions around a backstop. And it occurred to me that maybe the larger council and the public in general wasn't familiar with that concept. So that was the point of this exercise, was maybe reminding and maybe learning for the first time, some of them, what the backstop is and what it means. So, slide. And I think, aggressive sliding. I think you're all familiar with most of these, but the concept of the backstop is essentially, let's say you go and you get a mortgage and you have a job and it can cover the cost of your mortgage, but maybe you don't have a strong credit history. So you have two choices. You can have someone co-sign your loan, or you can make more money appear. And that's the decision we make when we create some of these special deals, right? Because the stadium, the ice center, the ballpark, not our typical. And so the basket of revenues that supports each one of these is very different. And what does that look like? Can it support on its own, or does it need a little revenue backstop from Metro? So some of these have, actually all of them, but the convention center, have the support of the city. So if revenues fall short, city is committed to come in and backstop. It's not a creative name, but it is the name. So, slide. When we're talking about considerations and process and what do we decide when we do these deals, that's a big one for us. We'd like to eliminate that Metro backstop so that this is truly a self-supporting financing. And we're not the only member of this party, right? There's the team, there's the state, there's Metro. And how do we leverage all of our resources together to get the most profound package? So the priorities we've set for this is lowest cost of borrowing. The lower we borrow, the more we can build. How do we eliminate that general fund exposure? And how do we eliminate the water and sewer pilot right now that's funding the operation? Slide. Stop me if I'm boring you, because I think you all know everything I'm telling you. It was a lot more fun when it was a crew that didn't know anything about what I was talking about. But the existing stadium was funded through these two sources: GO bonds that bought the land, which is almost paid off, and the Sports Authority bonds that you issued, and those are supported by the water sewer pilot and ticket taxes. And both of those sources are Metro funded, and the goal again is to get rid of the Metro backstop. So when we're looking at the proposed, next slide, the proposed funding sources for a new transaction, we have the three stadium-specific revenue options. So if we don't build a stadium, these revenues can't be directed anywhere else. So they go to this or they go nowhere. And I think that's really important. We're not robbing Peter. Peter is Peter, like Peter only is the stadium. So the choice is the 1% hotel occupancy tax that the state passed in January. The in-stadium sales tax, which already exists, but obviously when you put a dome on something, the opportunity increases. And so what does that look like? As well as the campus sales tax, which is not just the facility, but the facility and the surrounding campus. Slide. So how do we do that? How do we leverage all those resources? How do we make sure that they're going to be enough, they're going to be stable, predictable, that the credit quality is going to be there? How do we find that revenue source that maintains the facility? Because I think the deputy mayor spoke about that a little bit. Right now, Metro is responsible for the capital of the existing facility. We don't love that, especially as it gets older. So how do we find a revenue source that can support the ongoing capital for a new facility? Slide. And we can't do it alone. And this was meant to represent all of the external parties, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention Monica, Bob Lackey, how they've been so helpful and what we've done to date. I don't know if Bob will ever really escape us, but we appreciate all of his input. So we have a whole list of people. Some are new names, some are names you've seen before. I would like to highlight Inner Circle Sports and Greenberg Traurig. They work exclusively in stadium financing space. We're really fortunate to have them. And we're really hopeful that with this team and this group right here and the team, that we can get something back to you in short order for you to react to. So, thank you. Oh, Tom Gross is going to talk about documents and process.
Thank you, and good morning. A couple of things first. I was here to speak with you, I believe in July or August, about a facility assessment study and how we were going to go about getting that done. The council included some money in the operating budget for the Sports Authority for the study. It turned out not to be quite enough money, but we were able to find enough to get it underway. The study is underway, and I know one of the questions I got when I was here speaking about that before was, were you going to get that in time for it to be relevant to your decision making? And it will be. I spoke to the principal of the company a week ago Tuesday. He assured me that they expect to have it available for us early in November, which will be well in advance of any approvals that you will have to have. And then one observation about the previous slide with all the partners that we have engaged to help us with this deal. I've been with Metro, thank you, it's just not like magic. I have been with Metro since 1995, and I can't say that I've had a prominent role on every sports facility deal that we have done, but I have had at least a minor role on all of them. And in my view, this is the most capable and qualified group of people that we have ever had working with us on something like this. I have tremendous confidence in them, and like Kelly, I will observe that a couple of the names up there are a law firm and consulting firms that do almost exclusively this and have worked on just about every large sports facility deal in this country over the past 10 or 15 years. So we're well advised and feel comfortable that what we put in front of you eventually will have been well vetted. Next slide, please. So my part of this is a little bit dry, but it's a good time to provide a reminder of the kinds of things that we typically see in these sports deals. Most of the documents having to do with the stadium itself are going to be things that if you've been on the board a while will be familiar to you. And in fact, most of these are documents that we had associated with the original team deal. So probably first is the development agreement, which speaks to how the new facility would be constructed and financed. There has to be some kind of an arrangement about whose money is going where on the deal that we're anticipating asking you to approve. The team will be responsible for a big share of the construction costs. Metro will be too, and as Mr. Wilcox mentioned, so will the state. So how does a stadium get built? In this case, the current plan is for the team to build it with using those sources of funding, and this will all be addressed in that development agreement. Then going forward, after the facility is complete, there's going to be a team lease with the Sports Authority as the lessor, as it is on the current lease with the team. We expect the lease to have a term of about 35 years, matching the term of the bonds. Of course, one of the questions that we got last night from council was, wouldn't we hope that the facility will last longer than 35 years? And of course we do, and hope and expect that the team will sign on for an additional lease term after that. But the initial term we expect to be about 35 years. And this will be a robust lease. We have learned some things in our relationship with the Titans and our other sports partners over the years, the things that we have learned, And the things we've learned from other deals in other cities are likely to be part of the team lease. The guarantee, it's also important to know that somebody with some assets will be standing behind the obligations that the team is committing to. One of the other goals that Mr. Wilcox spoke about was the importance of keeping the team in Nashville for the long term. They've committed to that orally, and we expect that they will sign an agreement that commits them to staying here for the long term. That's important both for the city and the Sports Authority to know that there is that commitment, but it's also an important part of the bond finance package. Finally, there will be an agreement, as there is on all of these deals, between Metro and the Sports Authority, and we often talk about them as if they're the same entity, but legally the Sports Authority is separate and can own property in its own name. And it requires some interaction between Metro and the Sports Authority in order for bonds to be issued and to understand who's doing what on the transaction. So that's the sort of collection of documents we would expect to see on just about any sports facility deal like this. Next slide, please. And then there's some things that are going to have to be approved by both the Sports Authority and the council as a part of this. One of them has to do with the bonds, and all of the documents that were on the preceding slide will need to be in place before we can issue bonds. That requires council approval too. Particularly if there's a Metro backstop, there will not be in this case. And then as part of the financing on two of the slides that Ms. Flannery spoke about, part of the financing for this new building will come from, or is expected to come from an additional 1% countywide hotel occupancy tax. The council will have to approve that. And in addition, some of the money when we're hoping it's mostly for things surrounding the stadium, is going to come from the sales tax that's generated outside the stadium, but within a 130-acre campus, hopefully including a lot of the things that were on the slides that Ms. Greider talked about. And the council will have to approve the designation of that 130 acres, as will the state, to make sure that it aligns with the sports authorities and the council's priorities for revenue generation. Next slide, please. So there are some other things that are going to be unique to this deal that you wouldn't necessarily see in any of your other sports facility deals, and that has to do with the fact that all those parking lots currently belong to the Sports Authority. They're part of the whole stadium campus, and because neither the Sports Authority nor Metro is really in the development business, there's going to need to be some shuffling around there to get things in the right place. So one of those things is likely to be a transfer of the ownership of the properties surrounding the stadium, not the stadium itself, but what are currently parking lots or some portion of that, to Metro to engage a development partner to come up with some of those things that are going to help fund the stadium and provide the context that we're hoping to see. So we don't have a stadium surrounded by a sea of empty parking lots most of the time. We also need to engage people to help us with design of the campus infrastructure and kind of the grid and layout for the campus itself. Some of those things also are on Ms. Greider's slides. We also are going to need an agreement with the team that deals with the fact that during events, there really needs to be tight coordination between what's going on the stadium property and what's going on in the campus. Obviously, we hope and expect that those days will be very busy with lots of people coming in. But there are active businesses that are expected to be within that campus footprint and also people living there. So we need to make sure that traffic can flow smoothly and that people's experience when they're there visiting and when they're there living or in businesses in that area can function appropriately. In addition, since some of the surface parking, or eventually, presumably, almost all of the surface parking is going to be devoted to other uses, part of the agreement with the Titans is likely to be the construction of some structured parking to take the place of some of the stuff that's currently surface. And they are expected to have the right to use those during event days, and we'll need to have that taken care of in an agreement as well. Then again, because neither the Sports Authority nor Metro is typically involved in the kind of private development that we're envisioning here, we will at some point be needing to ask the council's authorization to solicit one or more development partners to help us flesh out designs and also to commit to building some of these things that we expect to be constructed around the stadium. Those will eventually lead to likely ground leases and development agreements with one or more developers. And I'd just like to reiterate that you see those slides in the East Bank visioning document and you think, well, that's great. And you sort of expect that it's going to appear on day one. And of course, it's not going to appear on day one. This is going to take several years. The stadium is likely to be the very first part of this. But there should be some public things too, in addition to buildings. There should be, parks and green space that we don't currently have. I know that all of us are happy to take questions. If you have any for me now or later, you're welcome to contact me then.
I have two quick questions.
Go ahead.
The first one is the developer, since you're up now.
Okay.
Have you identified any developers currently? Or?
We don't have anybody developed, and we want to use a solicitation process to find, obviously there aren't that many that are going to be big enough and well-financed enough to participate in something like this. This is likely to be, this is not a shopping center development. So the universe of possibility is probably not that big, but we do want to make it fair to everybody that might want to participate and has the wherewithal to do it.
And then my second one is backstop versus non-backstopping. Is that set in stone already? Is that still
It is under negotiation. I think it is a personal goal, and I think the team shares in that goal. I think that is how we've been operating, and I'm optimistic that will be how we end.
You'll end it in a non-backstop or for backstop?
I'm sorry?
Which way would you end?
Oh, we do not want a backstop. We want this to be a self-contained, self-supporting financing.
I might just add on the development agreement. There are some gating issues before we get that. That's, it's not years away, but it's not next week. We hope the Planning Commission adopts the plan, and then we would work through that solicitation process.
Okay, thank you. We have another question.
I'm kind of new to this, so I want my fellow board members to just bear with me for a sec. So this new development we're proposing for the stadium, right? You mentioned a team lease, but the team's only active, 4 months out of the year here? That's 8 home games. Is there any possibility to do other sorts of leases like CAA, UTA, Live Nation for music? Because if you have a stadium, you're gonna have a lot more people coming through here that's gonna be active for the hotels, for the spend. So that just seems logical to me.
Seems logical to us as well. I'm not sure how the leasing structure exactly would work with each. Obviously, the team would be probably the main tenant. As we mentioned in our slides, one of our goals for this project is to have demonstrable economic impact for the city, an increase in GNP, right? If we're going to invest these sort of dollars into a project like this, we need to see a return. I think part of that, part of the appeal of an enclosed stadium, which is why the state is interested as well, is that you can have more activated event days in an enclosed stadium than you could today, right? CMAs could be in January. I have not talked to the CMAs. I'm not trying to, I don't know, but you could have, you could have a music type
or some
festival
sort of commitment
year round, right? And so whether it would be a direct lease with Live Nation or one of the other acronyms that I don't know them all, but I'm not sure, but we are certainly looking into, we want that to be an active site, not just there, but also on the campus.
To add a footnote to that. It is likely to be the Titans as the tenant engaging these other partners. They will have a strong incentive to build the building up as much as they possibly can.
Got it.
So it is the expectation it'll be used for other events. One of the things we've learned from other deals is from the stadium where the 49ers play, where they have a sort of a dual lease arrangement that it's leased to the team during the season, and the city leases out at other times, and we have been warned away from that structure for lots of reasons.
Is there a reason why?
One of them is it complicates responsibility for maintenance and capital repairs. And as you've seen in these slides, one of our primary objectives is to make sure that responsibility for that, it doesn't fall on the city.
Levi Stadium. Levi Stadium.
Correct.
Just because I wear Levi's, that's why I know that.
Okay.
You guys can laugh. It's not, hi.
You got a question?
Madam Chair, yes. I have several questions, and I might do a little bit of rambling. It sounds as though you only have one facility in mind now. That's a closed stadium, and not renovating the existing stadium. Is that what it is?
It's a good question. The answer might be slightly unsatisfying, but the answer is we don't know yet. I mean, we cannot make that decision. There are, as I said, there are several gating factors. One is the Venue Solutions Group report that we expect to get back in early November that would tell us or confirm how much it would cost to renovate the stadium, what it would cost to bring it up to first-class condition. You know, that is a major data point, but we are still looking at both options.
Okay, now, I was interested in hearing dollars, cost of renovating the existing stadium and cost of building a new stadium. And I understand that, frankly, I like the idea of a new stadium, a closed stadium, but there's a cost factor involved. To begin, what would be the cost of renovating the existing stadium? And I know you have a study going now that would verify that. But also, what's the proposed cost of the enclosed stadium? And then, what is Metro's annual budget, operating budget, Metro government?
All right, let me try and take the three questions in order. The renovation stadium, you're correct. That is one of the things that VSG is evaluating. Budget for the current stadium has not been finalized, but the reported 1.9 to, you know, we had up to 2.2 in the capital budget. The CIB, which is Metro's capital planning, it's been called a wish list. It's confusing. I'll let Director Flannery walk you through that, but that would be at the absolute highest end of the range, I think. And your third question was around what is our annual operating budget?
What is Metro's annual budget? Yes.
A little bit over $3 billion, 3.3 this past year, which is 296. And how much of that is we share with schools?
Sure, yeah. So I would just say that is our operating budget, but a capital project would not be living in our operating budget. What does live in there that would be applicable is the debt service that we pay on the general obligation bonds, and that's, I think, projected at $410 million for 2023, but that's not where this payment would live, right? The GO is capital of Metro organization, schools. The debt service for the projects you guys fund lives outside of the city's operating budget.
Where would the funding come from Metro's position or standpoint? Where would the funding come from for a new stadium, renovated or new?
Well, as we're contemplating a new stadium, so we haven't seen the renovation number yet, so we don't know what we're solving for, and that is a TBD. If that number comes back high, how would we fund that, right? On the opportunity side, if we were to move forward with a new stadium, we have those three taxes that I went through that are all specific to an enclosed stadium, an NFL stadium, or a stadium and the surrounding campus. So that's the 1% hotel tax, the existing in-stadium sales tax, which with the opportunity for more events would generate more than it currently kicks off, as well as the campus-wide development. So that is how the Metro contribution isn't really Metro taxpayers. It's people that are in that area, in the campus area, at events, paying sales tax. So it's the sales tax for the people going to the events and the surrounding 130 acres that would be paying the Metro contribution. So there's, my hope, my dream, my goal is it doesn't show up in Metro's book at all because it's self-sustaining. So it'd be the team, those three sources, and TSU rents, ticket tax, kind of the small dogs that have always been there. But the big three are state statute mandates that can only be used for a facility.
Okay, I'm sort of looking at the whole picture. Nashville is a sports team, entertainers' haven, so to speak. It's because of its geographical location in the Southeast, it's an entertainment mecca. So a lot of dollars coming in. And the sports team would stand to be have a big benefit in this whole process. Now, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with just telling you a story that I heard when I was a child about an old man standing at the apex of a hill when the train was coming. And he was frantically waving his hands over his head, and the train stopped. And the engineer and the fireman sort of stuck their heads out of the cab and said, "What's wrong, old man? Is there trouble ahead?" And he said, "I just want to know if either one of you fellas want to buy a big old fat possum." And of course, they were livid behind that. The old man stopping a loaded train going up a hill. And they were just yelling at him. And he said, "Wait now, don't go getting upset. I ain't caught him yet. I just want to get him engaged." So now I want to use that to ask my next question. Is it possible for Metro Nashville to be a 30% owner in the Titans organization so that they may benefit from the money that they're spending here?
So I'm not going to play lawyer, but I'm going to give you my finance perspective first. The team, if you remember Deputy Mayor's goals, and not even goals, I think mandate, is that the team will be the single largest contributor to the remodel or construction, whatever it might be, of this project. So they're already, will be in it for a meaningful way. So the idea of Metro having an equity stake has not been asked, and so we're not really entertaining it. I'm gonna play lawyer. I'm pretty sure a government can't own any portion of a private organization. Did I just earn a law degree?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I'm not certain, I think that issue may be, it may be centered around eminent domain. And I'm speaking of someone making an offer to an entity that would be receptive to receiving that offer of being a partner. That was the only thing. I would like for that, I wish you would take it back to your committees to discuss.
We'll ask. I believe NFL, I don't work for the NFL or the city. I don't believe NFL rules would allow that. Ownership in the NFL is governed by the current owners group and the commissioner, and would default to the team on any further clarification there. But we will take it back and I guess look at it and come back to you all.
Not only look at it, but do a little research on it. I would appreciate that.
Sure.
I don't mean to stop the train. I know it's moving, but.
We have not been considering buying an ownership stake in the team. All that we have been looking at is around the stadium.
Could be beneficial.
I have a
I
question.
have another question, thank you.
So the first class, excuse me, thank you, out of practice. The first class stadium standard, is that, I know that's in our lease currently, is that a NFL standard for any new stadiums? Is that still the threshold that will be defined by as we're looking at capital improvements and maintenance, et cetera?
Tom, you've been wrestling with this.
I think so.
That phrase is not specific to NFL-related documents. The NFL has standards, just like all the other leagues do, for the facility quality and the maintenance standard. Some version of that phrase is likely to appear in this lease, but I want to reiterate that part of the objective here is to make sure that the team is responsible for the maintenance and capital needs of the facility going forward, and not Metro. Now, some of the funding from the sources that Director Flannery talked about can go towards that function, but that's the vision is for Metro and the Sports Authority not to have that responsibility going forward. The way we, in our most recent couple of leases, have made sure that the facility standard is appropriate is to require that the parties either jointly engage or the team engages a qualified engineering firm to assess the facility on some sort of a regular basis. And I don't remember what it is for the arena, but it's probably every 5 years or something, and produce a report. And the things that the report says have to be done, typically out of that funding. I'm not sure whether I answered your question.
No, you did. I mean, I think as a body and oversight of the facilities that we have in our purview. That is clarifying these terms are essential and critical as we maintain the property and so the work on the front end to vet it as much as possible before you come back to the authority is really appreciative and appreciate.
I have one last question. In terms of being it Metro backed, I'm back on my first question. Would the debt service be smaller if it's backed by Metro?
So that's the balance that we have and why we're relying so heavily on our external consultants to validate and kind of do feasibility work is what is the trade-off for, because 3 of those revenues, while the in-stadium sales tax technically exists, it doesn't exist in what we're contemplating with it having more events and generating more revenue. So it's really kind of 3 unknown stability-wise revenue sources. And so when you're asking bondholders to buy, 500 billion, whatever the number is, that's a lot of risk on them. And that to pay, you have to pay for that risk. You're saying instead of, that being a AAA, maybe it's a AA, and that's going to cost you a little more interest cost. Is it worth paying a little bit more in interest in exchange for asking Metro to backstop it and get the higher rating? And where is that spot between? So we still have to kind of do that homework, but as currently contemplated, I think we can do it without the support of Metro. And the good news is it'll leave a lot of money kind of flowing through the system in the long, because we're being super conservative to do this, but did that answer your question?
No, that's perfect. That's
Okay.
Okay, we have another question.
I've heard 2 or 3 different proposals about an enclosed stadium or a roofed stadium. I think the state's technology, when they said they were going to furnish $600 million for a roofed stadium, is that correct or not?
500 for an enclosed.
Okay, enclosed. So they did use enclosed. Okay, now taking out that we're this thing about a new stadium, what is the pecking order for approval of this process?
Do you want to, sorry, for this board, for council, or?
No, for the
all?
entire project. What is the process of okaying to get us to a stadium?
The 2 primary approvals need to come from the Sports Authority and the council. And typically,
Which one's first?
I think the Sports Authority is going to have to act first on at least some of these documents. And not to complicate this, but the states, because the state is going to have to approve some of this as well, both part of the designation of the 130 acres around the campus where the sales tax redirect can take place. But also the process for getting that $500 million into the project is going to require some state approval too. Not at the legislative level, but at a board level. Have I answered your question?
Partly. Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to be first, somebody's got to be second. It can't be a joint session.
My view is the Sports Authority will have to act first.
So the Sports Authority would be the first enacted thing over the Metro Council.
The way this typically looks is the Sports Authority requesting council authorization to issue bonds. So most of these documents have to be ready to go when you make that request. So that's why I say you're likely to come first. And if I can say one more thing about the documents, this is likely to be like 4 inches of paper. And I know one of the concerns that the authority has raised before is please don't dump all that on us and expect us to vote on it a week later. And so we will provide summaries. We'll give you plenty of time to ask questions before you have to read through it and vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Director Farner?
Thank you. You, Ms. Flannery, you may have already covered this, I think. How much debt remains on the current stadium?
There's the 2 pieces that we borrowed. Where are my notes? I have exact numbers. I was going to make them up. I might still anyways. On the
I
GO,
can't hear a little bit too, so.
on the GO, I don't know where I put my notes. On the GO, that was 75 million. I think it's 5 million outstanding. And on
5?
Yeah. It's happening in slow motion.
Okay.
Thank you. And on the Sports Authority, it's 35 of the 100. Okay, I lied. 10 million on the GO, 36 on the Sports Authority. And the GO matures in 2025, and so that's Metro's problem, that's not Sports Authority. That, when we talked about the operating budget and the GO debt service being about 420 million, that lives in there. So that is not a Sports Authority thing, that is 100% Metro's responsibility. 36 million is Sports Authority, and that is backed by the existing water sewer pilot, TSU rents, some ticket tax money, a little bit of parking revenue.
So how is that debt eliminated?
So that runs through 2033. If we move forward with doing a new stadium, we have to do a new borrowing, we will retire that debt and take it out entirely. It won't exist anymore, which is selfishly advantageous to Metro government because then I've removed that $36 million backstop off of the book. So it's kind of a paper win as well.
Thank you. My next question, and we've had some discussion about backstop. I guess my question is how under revenue bonds that are secured by tourism dollars, if tourism goes south, how are those bonds repaid? Like how does Metro eliminate its backstop position?
Well, as long as the bonds are outstanding, we have pledged to bondholders that Metro will be the backstop. And for Convention Center, which is primarily tourism, there's more than one series of bond outstanding, and some of them have the backstop and some of them don't. So that's maybe not the best example, but if for whatever reason we never collected another dollar in tourism revenue for those ones that were non-backstopped, bondholders would be out. They wouldn't get paid. Which, you know, you don't ever want to not pay your creditors, but that's a larger problem because we still issue debt, and the pool of investors that buy bonds is only so big, right? It's all of your mutual funds, and so if you make them mad, they're not going to buy anything else you need, and they're not going to distinguish between that's a Sports Authority bond, a Convention Center Authority bond, or that's Metro Nashville. You're all Nashville, and if you were able to find a buyer, it would be at a much higher interest cost.
So to eliminate the backstop for Metro, the process would be, and I'm asking this as a question, would the process be the bonds, the revenue bonds that you issue, the option would be possibly to pay a little bit higher interest rate on those bonds in order to not guarantee those with the backstop?
That is the calculus we are doing right now. How much revenue, how many revenue sources do we have to throw at this deal to get the same rating and the same interest level as we would if we used the GO backstop? So at the time of issuance, we will make that decision. We're backstopping or are we not? But once you're in it, you're in it. You know?
Right.
Sure. Sam wants me to talk about coverage ratios.
Oh, great.
He did it. So in the event, you know, we don't, when we model any deal, if it's the Convention Center or Sports Authority or the ice sports park, whatever, Ford, I don't know, I don't do athletes. We always make sure it cash flows and not just making sure we cover that year's debt service. We plan for just these type of things. What happens if there's a pandemic and it lasts a year?
I was about to say that, right.
So we always keep a coverage. So we keep, you know, each credit has a different requirement that we tell bondholders. Not only are we going to pay you what we owe you this year, we're going to keep this much in reserve in case of an emergency. And so each transaction is a different requirement. It's usually around 1.25 to 1.5 times of the next year's debt service coverage. So in the event that there is a shortfall, you've kind of given yourself at least a year to either recover or negotiate your way out of it. And that would be the expectation here as well. Backstop or no backstop, we're always going to have a coverage requirement.
I mean, I think that's an important.
So you're saying Sam was right that I should have talked about it?
No. I think that's, you know, you can only plan, but, you know, what if we have an unforeseen pandemic? That was my point, is that things happen that we could sit here and say, oh, that would never happen, right? We can never imagine a time when tourism is not what it is today, right? And so, but the possibility exists that it might not be. And I think that we have to ask those questions and we have to consider, but ultimately, we're a backstop.
Yeah, and we do
I mean,
that.
or our credit is a backstop, or does that make sense?
I think so. And we do that on all, not just kind of the more sensitive taxes, we do that on the revenue bonds as well. We have coverage requirements on those and,
It's not a critical, it's just a reality. I guess what I'm saying is just a reality that we're guaranteeing those bondholders that will we pay them for the
yeah.
faith of Nashville. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just wanted to know if we can get access to the presentation that you all delivered today.
Yes, I sent it an hour before the meeting, so apologies. So it should be in your inbox. Michael, I think your email is the only one that bounced. So I'll try and get an email for you and send it to you. This is also posted online. And while I have the microphone, I do want to give a shout out to Metro Council and the East Bank Committee chaired by Bob Mendez, who's been serving as sort of a gathering spot for information and collecting data and the presentations that are being presented to his committee. And then I also want to note that they also just posted the questions and responses regarding the East Bank development and the Titan Stadium, which are also now posted online. So I would encourage you all to read. I think there's 5 or 6 pages of questions, so I would encourage you all to go with that as well.
Awesome.
Real quick, Sam, do you mind sending either an email or I can see me after so I can get the link to where it's posted online somewhere?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll just respond to that.
If you don't mind, that'd be great.
With the corrected email, and then I'll respond to all of them.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all so much for that Nissan Stadium update. Clearly, you can see that there's a lot of interest around this board, so we will appreciate if you would continue to give us small bites. Okay, so keep us in the loop. Thank you so much. There are more, I promise you. Okay, next, we have our facility questions. So at this time, I'd like to give the board members an opportunity to ask questions of any of our facility partners. We have representatives from Bridgestone Arena, Nissan Stadium, First Horizon Park, and Geodis Park. So if there are any questions that you have that you would like to address with our partners, feel free to do so at this time. We've heard a lot, so you may not have questions. Okay, so we are at the point where we are open to closing out our agenda, and I'd like to thank the board members, the Sports Authority staff, Metro Finance, Metro Legal, and our facility team representatives for being here and contributing this morning. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, October 20th at First Horizon Park, and we'll look forward to that. If there's no other business, I will entertain a motion to
So moved.
adjourn. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.